This audio is brought to you by MuslimCentral.com.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah, amma ba'd. Khasa'is, or the specialities of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And we mentioned around 15 of them, and the fact of the matter is that there are closer to 50 special things that only he was given and no other person was given. And we will begin today by talking about his physical appearance, how he used to look, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And realize that it is the sunnah of Allah, it is the custom of Allah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends prophets and messengers with the most perfect characteristics, inner and outer. And the reason He does so is so that mankind has no reason to reject this message. Every messenger has come with the most perfect characteristics, the most perfect mannerisms, and also perfect images as well. Many characteristics that have been described, the physical features of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For example, Ar-Rubayy binti Muawwidh, one of the Sahabiyat, when her son asked her, what was the Prophet ﷺ like? This is later on after he has passed away and she is now an old lady. So people are coming to eagerly describe the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so all she could say, and this is reported in At-Tabarani's Kabir and also Al-Bukhari's Book Al-Manaqib, all she could say was, Ya bunay, oh my dear son, if you were to have seen him, you would have thought that the sun had risen up. That's all he could describe. I don't know how to describe it to you. If you were to have seen him, you would have thought that the sun has now risen up. This is the rising sun. And it is amazing that Rubayy describes him as a sun, beautiful sun. Ka'b ibn Malik describes him as a moon. Ka'b ibn Malik, another famous companion, that he said that whenever the Prophet ﷺ was happy, his face would light up as if it was the full moon. And it is beautiful that the Sahabah are describing the Prophet ﷺ with what they know to be the most beautiful, and that is the sun and the moon. So we have one Sahabi, he became the vizier of Muawiyah, he lived a grand life. Amr ibn al-As later on would say that there was nothing that was more sweeter to me, more beloved to me, than to stare at the face of the Prophet ﷺ. Now I want you to pause here. This is not how a man talks usually, right? There was nothing more beloved to me than to stare at the face of another person. It's not how a man talks. But the beauty of the Prophet ﷺ is so overpowering. His jamal, his nur is so great that Amr ibn al-As is saying, there was nothing that I got more peace from, more serenity from, more ahla, it was nothing sweeter than to simply look at the face of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And yet, and he said, and I could never get enough of looking at him. I never got tired. There was no malal, I never got tired of looking at him. And yet, were you to ask me how he looked, I couldn't describe him. Were you to ask me how he looked, I couldn't describe him. Why? He said, because along with this desire to stare at him, there was also this awe, this reverence that I had that couldn't allow me to just stare directly at him, and I'd have to lower my face. In other words, there are two emotions. If you like, there's two powers, if you like. I don't like being metaphysical, but there's two types of powers emanating from the Prophet ﷺ. The first of them, he's attracting Amr's vision to him. And the second is that awe, that overpoweringness that Amr cannot stare directly. This is Rasulullah ﷺ. How can you stare at him? You have to sit with dignity. You have to sit with what we call in Arabic hayba and waqar. You show a type of dignity in front of the Prophet ﷺ. And therefore he's saying, even though I love to stare, I couldn't stare. And if Amr ibn al-As could not stare at him as much as he desired, and this is a beautiful point by the way as well, most of the descriptions of the Prophet ﷺ, they come from the younger Sahaba, not from the older Sahaba. And of the greatest or the most explicit descriptions is from Anas ibn Malik, who was a little kid. So Anas does not have the same type of, if you like, emotions that the elder Amr ibn al-As has. And Anas ibn Malik, he was introduced to the Prophet ﷺ when he was 7 years old. His mother came to him and she gifted her son as a servant. And basically Anas would wake up and run to the Prophet's house, stay there all day, and then go back to his mother's house. So he would serve the Prophet, fetch him water, do this and that for him. So this is Anas ibn Malik. Anas ibn Malik says that the Prophet ﷺ was neither very tall such that he stood above the crowd, nor was he short such that he would be ignored. He was in the middle. He was of a medium stature. And the Prophet ﷺ was neither extremely white, and nor was he a ruddy brown. Now, pause here for a while. The Arabs, they called what we call white, they called it yellow. And that's why they called the Romans Banu al-Asfar. They called the Romans the tribe of the yellow people. Just like over here the American Indians, what did they call whites? Pale face, right? This is not a skin color that they're familiar with, okay? They call white is a lightish brown. It's not the white that we consider Caucasian white. Okay, that white they called asfar, which then was, it's not really white, it's yellowish to them. That's how they considered it, okay? So, the Prophet ﷺ was a very lightish color of brown. The actual skin color that he had was a lightish color of brown. A lot of people say he was middle. The Prophet ﷺ's hair was not in curls, nor was it straight. It was firm hair, like most men's hair is. Of course, you know that Salama and others, when the Prophet ﷺ would go to sleep, she would in fact collect his sweat in a jar. So it's hot, there's no AC, there's no fan. He's sweating. So she would collect this sweat in a jar, in a small bottle. Why? They would use it as perfume. They would use it as perfume. And they would also use it as medicine. Put it in a drop of water, like this is their medicine. They put it in some water and they drink it. This is the Sahaba, they're living with him. They see with themselves, they smell. They see the reality of the miracle of the Prophet ﷺ. Al-Bara ibn Azib described the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, the Prophet ﷺ was of average stature, and he had broad shoulders. His hair was thick. I knew him even before the Risala began. And Ali was his son-in-law. So Ali is a close family member who definitely has seen the Prophet ﷺ more than many of the other Sahaba. Ali ibn Abi Talib says that the Prophet ﷺ did not have a very fleshy face, nor was it completely round. They're trying to describe him as being, imagine now, we're not allowed to draw pictures, obviously, the Sahaba didn't draw, so they're trying to use words to get the imagery across. So they're saying, he wasn't like this and he wasn't like that, he was in the middle. When he walked, he would walk briskly, fast. It is sunnah to walk fast. When he walked, he would walk briskly, as if he's descending down a slope. In other words, he's so fast, it's as if he's walking down the slope. When he turned, he would turn to face with his whole body. So he's walking, somebody calls him, he doesn't say yes, no. He turns to face him with his whole body. And subhanAllah, modern presenters and modern speakers, they tell you the exact same advice. That when you speak to somebody, never speak with your head turned. Turn your whole, face him. Between his two shoulders was the seal of the prophethood. Now we're going to talk about this inshallah in a few weeks. The Prophet ﷺ had a physical khatam, physical seal. And it was between his shoulder blades, shaped like a pigeon's egg, an oval, small oval, like a pigeon's egg. And it was in a place that nobody's hair grows over. Salman al-Farsi accepted Islam because his Christian teacher had told him that the sign of the Prophet is that he's going to have the seal between his two shoulders. And so when Salman al-Farsi came, and this is the story, we're jumping the gun here, Salman al-Farsi came to the Prophet ﷺ testing him, does he have the signs or not? One day he came, he had the first sign, check, he went home. Second day he came, he had the second sign, check, he went home. And these two signs, Salman accepted Islam, and he told his long story, which we will give an entire, inshallah, lesson about.